You're listening to a programme from BBC Radio 4.
As a new parent, I recently read a study which reported that fear of failure among our children is at epidemic proportions. It can leave our children with a destructive perspective that creates a culture of fear, a fear of losing, and leaves them afraid to take risks and never achieve complete success. My guest today was one of those children. Now a successful businesswoman, Kate Hardcastle joins me to give her perspective on why it's so important to challenge that perception. Just take me back to the girl that you were then and how you coped.
I went into a secondary school environment and didn't fit, and that's, I think, where problems started, perhaps some of the challenges for me.
Tell us about that.
We came from a very loving family, but a family that was certainly struggling with financial means. When it was time for me to start secondary school, we got a list of things stated quite clearly. You wear the school blazer and you wear a school logo emblazoned on the blazer, and we couldn't afford the school uniform, so the blazer was given to us. I was the only person in probably a year of 250 students to be in impeccable white shirt, blazer, neat uniform. The only one. Just thought, oh, I've almost worn a red arrow straight above my head. It kind of started literally day one at school.
Was it your perception that you were different? Obviously, you're wearing this blazer, which set you apart quite visibly
yeah.
and obviously. But were you picked on as a result of that, or did you just feel out of the loop?
I was definitely picked on for 5 years following that.
I mean, just give me a typical scenario.
You would be grabbed by the shirt collar and you'd be pushed against a wall or in a toilet, or money taken, or roughed up, books taken, homework stolen. That would be typical. There was a small brook, and on a winter's day when it had iced over, I was dragged down there and dragged across the field for quite a long time without being seen. And the ice was taken off the brook and hit over my head by a group of 6 girls. And I was just left there. And that was the day I had to go back and talk to my parents about it, because my uniform had been ruined and I was black and blue. And, it was just a horrible, horrible situation for someone who was just trying to learn.
I mean, it sounds terrifying.
Yeah, it was. I found it very difficult to deal with. I resented going to school and having to go to school every day. It took all of my enjoyment and my passion out of wanting to learn.
Did you blame your parents for sending you? Because obviously you had your immense trust in them and they were very good people. So you must have questioned, why did they send me here?
When I started to raise the issue with them, the challenge was always going back to the school and trying to work things through with the school, which highlighted the problem and caused more problems for me anyway.
It must have been a very lonely place.
No one wants to be the friend of the person who's on the receiving end of all of this, because you associate yourself with the challenges, and no one sadly came to my aid. Eventually I found a mutual friend in one of the many hobbies and pastimes that I suddenly invented, because the classes for those were after school and in lunch break. I had no interest in most of them, but it generally meant a teacher was present and nothing was going to happen to me.
So we get this pretty horrendous picture of that learning environment where you were learning because you were throwing yourself into it to try to avoid the attentions of these girls. When did that start to develop in as much as you thought, I now know what I want to do with my life?
I admire business people like Anita Roddick. I was so into the Body Shop and I knew the whole background and the history of it, and I loved the fact that she stood at what she stood up for.
So this bullied teenager was you were actively looking for role models for people to inspire you?
Constantly. Sadly, though, we didn't have anyone from outside of the school coming into the school. We didn't really talk about external role models. Constantly asking, what could I get out of this? What was the opportunity for me? Could we please have a media class in the school? I'd like to do media. Could we please have business studies in the school? Because I'd like to do that.
Were they your aspirations at that point then?
Business studies hugely. I knew that if I could get into a business, learn a trade and go and be successful at that, then I could start to make something of myself. This is what the whole drive for me was, maybe it came from Anita Roddick being a role model or business people being role models, but what I understood from that is when you were deemed a success, people heard you, and then when people heard you, you could start to move things one way or the other.
And I can see how that might have been influenced by this
you had been, up until that point, fairly invisible. No one was hearing the pain that you were going through. So to be heard was the one thing. I completely understand that. You wrote to Anita Roddick, didn't you?
I did, yes.
What did that letter say?
I wrote several times. I explained my whole situation. I think they were probably quite emotional letters to start with.
So you told her you were being bullied?
Oh, yeah.
So she saw you?
She did. She saw me a lot later. She was just finishing a business talk somewhere. I spent every single penny I had on the transport. At that time, I was very interested in how she'd championed charity through her business, particularly helping women internationally to work and to find justice for themselves, to find a life for themselves beyond what was expected to them. And probably that story was appealing to me because, again, in a way, I had a lot of resonance with that. I understood what it was like to try and find your voice.
What was the one piece of advice she gave you that you've carried with you today?
Probably don't know if I can say it. Don't take any shit. Don't take any nonsense. You do what you want to do, what you believe. And that's the first time anyone had told me that. It's the first time anyone had said it was okay to do something different, to do something new. Even though you were taking a lot of grief from bullies at the time, you were this very lonely young schoolgirl, and yet you fought against all of that. You railed against that. I'm trying to ascertain where, if it does relate to you, this concept of fear of failure and how it might sort of hinder our careers or how it might actually drive them. Careers advice was, Kate, you're not an academic who's going to be a great scientist or mathematician, but you're quite bright. That was the phrase that was used. You're quite bright. So a banking career probably would be a really good thing for you. You get in there and you work at local bank X.
How did you feel about that?
To start with, inside I was screaming that's not what I wanted to do, but I never once argued with it, and therefore I did go to work in a bank. And I failed my A-levels and I gave up. I gave up, Kate. I couldn't fight anymore. I just wanted to live by people's expectations of me. And the expectation is that I would fit in the middle and I would have this kind of in the middle life. I think fear of failure, a lot of it is about how you feel about someone else, about how you feel about their emotions, how you feel about what they think for you.
Not living up to their expectations.
Not living up to their expectations. And that's what it was driven by. This was the destination and course that was being set around me. And therefore, the right and respectful thing to do is to go.
And it was singing that then brought you to your true vocation, which is the marketing. So tell us about that.
There was a backing singer's job. And I went to an audition and I kind of got through it. So met a lot of friends there and that gave me confidence. I suddenly became part of something. And actually with the confidence, I grew into my looks. I grew into the person I started to be. Still sadly not enough to change my destination of the career or...
So you were in banking at that point?
I was going into banking.
Were you happy?
Desperately unhappy. I was just so useless because my heart wasn't in it. Was going into work every day and thinking, this is it. This is 40 years. 40 years of you get up, you do 9 to 5, go home again, and then you live for your evenings and weekends.
So how did the marketing come about then, the marketing career?
Started talking to the person that was running the band and said, I think, if you don't mind, I'm just going to have a go at trying to get us a few more gigs. And I'd go in and I'd hold my own quite well. And on a couple of occasions, the meeting would be, how old are you, love? Oh, I'm 18, why? Most people don't get through my door till they're 30. You're not doing too badly at this. It's quite an impressive approach. What do you do? You're in a bank. You're in the wrong career, And that was sort of the steer, the very, not very glowing, but the little bit of encouragement that I needed. And when I started to get the gigs, land the success for the band, I thought, this is more exciting to me than the performance. This is more exciting for me for being on the stage and singing. This is something that I'm really enjoying. So I started applying for jobs and I worked in a factory environment in a very small marketing department that were essentially metal bashers. It was a foundry that shaped metal and I worked extremely hard. I worked day and night to try and turn this around and make sure I started heading in the right direction.
So when was the point at which you thought, I'm here in the career that I want to be in and I'm thriving?
Not until years and years afterwards. Because I think once you've had the conversations, be it with the teachers, be it with the my family to an extent, be it with the other children, be it with the careers advisors. And generally everyone's pretty much given you not the right move, not the right place to go. And you have taken a complete risk. You don't feel secure. You don't feel at all, this is the right thing. Oh, great. Well done. Your confidence is completely shot. I felt I was waiting for everyone to wait for me to fail again. And I think had that happened, I could just imagine, you're from here, you live here, you work in a bank, this is what you do. You gave all that up because you thought you were high and mighty and thought you were better than this. Well, you're not. So I think it took me a long, long time to think, actually, this was the right move. Probably actually when I was on the stage collecting an award. But that felt to be the first validation, the first, yes, you fit, you've done the right thing and you're good at what you do.
So this was the National Award for Young Marketeer of the Year. You won that.
I was so aware of, again, fear of failure or fear of looking like I'd risen above my station. I would never go and repeat any of that life back to the people I live closely by. And probably, I told my parents, but didn't take my parents to the award ceremony because I thought I was going to lose and I didn't want them to be embarrassed to be all the way in London and spending a lot of money in coming to London to support me and then let them down. I think after getting my initial role in marketing and being able to work really hard and tenaciously to keep getting up the marketing ladder, that saw me take on different roles, more senior roles, and then I was headhunted from business to business.
You took your first managerial position in business, and yet you had an awful lot going on personally because you'd been diagnosed with endometriosis. Mm-hmm. And yet you didn't take very much time off work to deal with that, did you?
No, I was, again, in an environment where I was the youngest person in management, and I was also the only female in management, and I was acutely aware that I was being told that there were reasons I wouldn't be able to achieve what I needed to achieve. And therefore, when I started becoming quite challenged with illness, I didn't tell my colleagues it was happening. When it got too much and I was hospitalised, I just rang up and asked to take leave. I had accrued a lot because I never took holidays. And then for 2 years of fighting the illness and having various tests and operations done, I just would book a holiday and not admit to it. And again, it was fear, a worry that people think I wasn't up to the job. I've now got to the point where I've had so many roles in different sectors and environments, I've been able to create my own business.
Did you lay any other ghosts to rest when you went back to the school?
It was a horrendous day for me, actually. I don't think they realised it, but I started shaking. I'd never been into the property since. I found it very difficult to go back to. It hadn't changed that much since the days I was there. And to go back as the person that had been invited in and a respected businesswoman and feel like a quivering 12-year-old again was quite ridiculous. But I think I promised myself in the library, which was still there, if I ever get through this, I'm going to come back and I'm going to be a businesswoman.
And you felt that you owned it. You were in your own skin when you were there.
I did. The sense of a fear of failure sometimes actually can be a bit of a good thing. I think it makes you driven. I think it makes you hungry. And when you achieve things, you appreciate them all the more. But it shouldn't be so much of an extent that it knocks you off your course, that it knocks you out of your own skin and suddenly you start becoming someone else, which happened to me.
You can download many more BBC Radio 4 programmes for free. Find these at bbc.co.uk/Radio 4.